Please rise for the pledge. Mr. Peterson, will you lead us in the pledge, please? Hello, everybody. I hope everyone had a nice long weekend. We are going to start our meeting tonight with a presentation from Mr. Calabrese. It's for the turf installation at Roger Ludlow Middle School. Being that we're discussing maintenance and we have a couple of field projects in the proposed operating budget, I thought it would be helpful just to see how our projects fit into some of the larger plans at the town level, which might affect your decision making. So thank you, Mr. Calabrese, for being with us tonight.
You have to push the button and hold it the entire time.
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be a quick presentation.
Things have changed.
All right, well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm not sure that I can get used to this technology up here. Push, hold, okay, talk. I think I got it. Well, thank you guys. I promise you I do miss these meetings very much, but I will make it quick. I didn't pass anything out. It's not a presentation, but I did want to give you guys an update on where I stand with the Roger Ludlow Middle School turf project. You guys have probably heard some rumblings about it. I do plan on bringing this before the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and hopefully the RTM starting in February. This project is basically to turf the lower fields at Ludlow Middle School, which are the fields right behind off of Uncowa Road. We did replace the grass fields there a few years ago when they got destroyed by a lacrosse tournament. The town of Fairfield has what I would call a field shortage currently. This is not a new topic. It's something that we've been tasked with over the last decade or more, actually. But adding turf fields with lights create more playing time for both the high school and the middle school. Our high school football team, Ludlow, is begging us for field space all the time. Obviously, football is one of those sports that tears up the field. Rugby is another one that tears up grass fields. So putting those kinds of groups on turf fields always help. And obviously, we only have 3 turf fields here in town, both high schools and Tomlinson Middle School. So it's tight. But the way I'm going to go forward with this project is I've mapped it out for a $4 million project, including the lights. And the infill, which I think will be the biggest hurdle that we're going to have to clear, especially through the RTM, is the type of infill. I've always pushed for crumb rubber. Currently, that's the industry standard. There's no health reports out that say that it's a hazard, though we get them all. We get people saying that, oh my gosh, there's this incident that happened in Washington and other places throughout the country, and there are. But there's no reports, no science to back those up. So looking at our neighbors right next door, Westport, whose RTM decided to ban crumb rubber as an ordinance, so they can't use crumb rubber on their fields, they decided to go with TPE, which is a thermoplastic elaster, I believe. I might have butchered that last part. But it's a type of rubber, but it's not a crumb rubber. So it's made of virgin materials, things of that nature. But the downside is it's very expensive. It's about $400,000 more expensive than crumb rubber would be. So the way I was budgeting this project with the quotes was the $4 million number includes TPE. And essentially what I want to do going through the boards is say, look, we can go TPE for $4 million, or if you don't want to spend the $4 million, we can cut it back to crumb rubber for $3.5 million. So I went on the high side rather than going in and saying, I want to do this as crumb rubber and it's $3.5 million, but now I've got to ask for $4 because you guys want me to go to TPE. So that's essentially where I am right now. It's a $4 million project to turf that whole lower field area with lights. I think it'll benefit the high school. I think it'll benefit the middle school, and then obviously it's going to benefit all our recreation programs too. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, but again, like I said, this wasn't really me coming to ask for money because it's going to be on the town side where we're going to carry this project, but it always does help to have the support of the Board of Education behind us, when I'm going to present this. So happy to answer questions if there's any.
Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Peterson?
Just very briefly on the crumb rubber versus the TPE issue, is there a movement at the state or FCAC level to make a standard one way or another?
So there's not really a push to go one way or the other right now. Majority of the FCX schools do have turf fields, whether they're organic infill like Wilton has, or they're TPE like Westport has, or they're crumb rubber like majority of the schools have. The only thing that we've got coming down the pipeline potentially is at the state level, through Hartford. They have tried to put a crumb rubber ban in place in the past. It has not been successful. So, again, if we go TPE, we don't really have to worry about that. Even with the way the legislation works, we'd probably have the project in place before they even got that passed through. So I'm not too worried about it, but that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just would be concerned about putting in a field that could be rendered obsolete by state legislation, that we might have to renovate at that point at additional cost. So that's just a random thought.
No, it's a good point, and unfortunately, it could happen with any of our turf fields or our poured-in-place playgrounds that we currently have, too.
Mrs. Maxinelli?
Well, first, welcome back. A couple of questions. For the state ban and that dime, was that science-based or finance-based, or are you aware?
Well, the state hasn't banned it yet.
Right, so, and I'm sorry, the pushback against banning it, was that science-based as in there's no reason for this, or was that financially based?
It's twofold. It's twofold because there's no science that backs it up right now. Doesn't mean there couldn't be science coming out, 5 years from now. And then, yes, the financial side of it, because the people, most of the municipalities are looking at, just like Mr. Peterson said, if we already have it in place and the state says, well, now you can't have it and you need to rip it out, that's definitely going to be a large expense.
Okay. And two other quick questions. Do you have numbers regarding what this saves? And I'm like, what's the maintenance of a turf field financially compared to the maintenance of a grass field? Or ballpark numbers?
So this is ballpark numbers. Typically, a maintenance cost of a natural grass field is about $21,000, $25,000 all in once you start including linings and stuff like that a year. Some of our fields do run more than that. Ludlow would definitely be a case where it's closer to the $45,000 because it's not just one field; it's like a field and a half to two fields almost. So.
But then versus a turf field?
Turf field is virtually, you've got to groom it basically 3 to 4 times a year with like a brush. So you just drag it behind the tractor. So it's very minimal.
Okay. And then my last question is there any kind of plan in place for other fields? I mean, is this part of a waterfall presentation, between Sturgis or Burroughs, any of these other fields?
Yeah, it is. So this was the first one I was attacking because it's a little smaller of a project, and really it's kind of test the waters time for me with the RTM and Board of Finance just to see what the appetite is. But yes, I have put the South Pine Creek Complex, which is a soccer field, a baseball field, on the waterfall chart as well for a couple of years down the line. I believe 2 more years out. So yeah, my plan is to try to put as many turf fields and lights where I can. We need the field space.
Sorry, one last question. I had always, when my daughter was part of the FUSA and the FAST tournament, which always makes a point of reinvesting in the town, I thought that was something that FUSA had been looking to partner with the town with to expand. Obviously, this last FAST tournament had to get canceled, but I thought that was part of the conversation for a few years.
I'm glad you brought that up because, I'm up here trying to rush through the presentation. This is good stuff, right? I've already met with FUSA, Fairfield Youth Lacrosse, and Fairfield Youth Football, and all 3 have bought into contributing funds to this anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 apiece, on top of fundraising additional funds for the town to do this project. All 3 know that they don't get priority on the fields based on the amount of money that they're able to raise. We're still going to divvy out the fields the same way we always have.
Mrs. Gerber?
The lights. Has there been any outreach? I mean, I know that there aren't a ton of neighbors, but would there be any issues with neighbors with lights going in there?
So we haven't done the outreach yet. Normally, we will canvass the area right there, right off Ancover Road. However, we haven't had any complaints of lights in years there, and we have them currently at the high school.
Right.
And we, Parks and Rec Commission did approve temporary lights for Fairfield Youth Football to put on those fields. And we've been using them for the last, I think we just used them this past season there. We used them at Tomlinson 2 years in a row. And we haven't had any complaints at Ludlow about the lights at all.
Okay, yeah, I just wasn't sure. I mean, there aren't a ton of neighbors, but just, and then the other question I had just, and I don't know if anything's changed with the new development behind Ludlow, but I know like the cross-country team used to, their start of their meets was running across that field. Would there be any concerns or issue of them running across the turf field once it's?
No, I don't believe there'll be any issues with them running across the turf field. The one thing we'll have to work out with Fairfield Public Schools is potentially relocating where they throw their javelin and the shot put and all that. That may have to be relocated to either Sturgis or the front field, just somewhere else, because that's not going to be able to be done on the turf.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Jacobson.
Thank you very much. Just a couple questions. The fields that you're looking to put in at RLMS, is it one field, multiple fields, regulation size for varsity sports? Is this mainly for rec, etc.?
Yeah, so we plan on putting in multiple fields. One will be a regulation multi-use field, which will be able to house any of the sports, whether it's girls lacrosse, football, or soccer. It'll be able to do all the different sports there. And then the other side, the other field that's left over will mainly be a practice field. It'll be a small-sided field because we can't fit another regulation size field there. There was talks of potentially looking at doing a softball field or a baseball field. Unfortunately, with the way that area is laid out, it's just really not feasible to fit that type of field in there. So the two fields that'll be there will mainly be the full-size multi-purpose and then kind of a practice multi-purpose field.
Okay, thank you. And then, maybe not for right now, but as you work through the town bodies, do you have any data on a longitudinal basis in terms of cancellations, having to reschedule, not being able to, putting fields out of commission that can't be used because of weather, et cetera, that this would have both participation impact on, but also fiscally?
I don't have those numbers tonight, but my office has put them together.
Okay, I'd love to see those when you have a chance. Did you price out any other fills besides the TPE, like the organic,
No,
Coke, any?
No, so I didn't go with the organic stuff only because for organic, like the coconut and stuff like that, you've got to install irrigation. And I didn't want to install irrigation because then we're dealing with freezing, so fields could still be closed or oversaturating. I just wanted to go with either crumb rubber or TPE where I know we're not going to have those issues. So if it rains, we know that field is still going to be open. Essentially, it would be open year-round.
Okay, and then my last question. And the shot put discus, that was a project for this year. And it's obviously has issues. Do we have any, you're thinking that it won't fit down there anymore and that it will need to be relocated. So I'm just curious at some point if we can get an update on that since that was a budget in the budget for this year.
I could talk with Angeles on that. And if we need to carve out a section of that lower field to keep it grass, to keep those things there, we might be able to do that. Essentially, what I had quoted out was pretty much everything inside the fence line. So it did incorporate that area. But happy to talk with Angeles on that.
Okay, thanks so much.
Any other questions? Mrs. Maxinelli.
Just one last quick. Obviously, you mentioned having the Board of Ed behind this. I hope you'll let the board know or let Christine know to let all of us know in terms of what the schedule is for meetings, so it's on our calendars early.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Casey, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you guys very much.
Okay, moving right along. Discussion of the superintendent's recommended 2020-2021 budget request. We're going to start with just any follow-up questions from our January 14th budget review about some of the additional questions that were asked or some of the follow-up. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly? We'll let them.
All right, so I had submitted extremely late some questions as follow-up, so completely understand if anything just needs to be deferred and answer received in Friday packet. I did the best I could. So my first question was regarding the Malone enrollment projections, and through the chair to Mr. Cummings, I'm not sure, for who would handle this, but my question had been for both the 10-year and the year-to-year projections. In terms of margin of error or just valid estimates, would these numbers be considered good and otherwise valuable, or are they numbers that would suggest the firm isn't doing the job we're paying them for?
I would say that with any of these type of projections, clearly the closer you are to today's date, the more reliable those projections are. I know I'm not going out on any particular limb, knocking any particular firm. Malone and Broom would absolutely agree with what I just said because I've heard them say it. I think that we're very reliant on the immediate 1-2 year numbers. Clearly, we'll be responsive in the moment if the numbers indicate that we have to add particularly a section at elementary or not add a section at elementary. We'll be responsive to that in the 2021 budget. I think where the numbers are going to need to be checked more thoroughly is when we begin to look at the 10-year and any conversation about potentially redistricting. Then we're going to have to look at, and I've shared with Malone and McBroom each year they've given us numbers, what our actuals are, with an understanding, having worked with them in the past, that they revise their algorithms based on the numbers that they're getting back. So we're working with them to continually make that as close to real as possible.
And I guess my point being is that while we have the conversation here, you feel comfortable and confident going before other town bodies. And if anybody were to cast aspersion on or, and otherwise question these numbers as being something we can base decisions on, you still feel confident that this is the company and these are the numbers to move forward with?
I do.
Okay, thank you. My second question was regarding last week's attachment number 2 regarding the legal firms, because we've had conversations off and on for years regarding whom we currently use, and what their role is. And I was wondering if you saw anything in these numbers that make you question, is that a conversation we should resume in terms of the service that we're getting, comparison to each other?
I would tell you that when we look at these types of numbers, this is a conversation that Ms. Deasy and I have had kind of more off the cuff as we look at any particular issues that have come up. We're very reliant on her ability and experience to determine whether these are fair numbers and worth consideration. I think that what I would encourage the board to do, if there was interest in pursuing this conversation, I really do think that we should schedule some type of executive session, for example, to peer into this more closely. And like any service, it's worth time now and then to take that time and look more closely at things and reevaluate.
Okay, so I'll just put that out there to the chair, as something as possibly to talk about. But and then I was hoping we could also just get, and again, a Friday packet memo would be fine. If we could just have a reminder again about what the specialty is or the area of focus of each firm, or now, I don't care which.
Can you do that now?
So Pullman and Comley, as you know, because we work with Steve Sedor quite often collectively as a group, they do our labor and employment negotiations and the other board issues that might come up, like a grievance. And there's some other general work that they would handle for us as well. If we had a question about a contract or an FOI issue, we might bring that to them. Shipman and Goodwin and Bircham Moses are both special education firms that we use in the areas of special education. We have used Shipman quite a bit in some other miscellany as well, student records issues, things like that that have come up. Kanan, Escalera, and McHale is our firm that we use. We have a hearing officer who comes, who the board has appointed to hear expulsion hearings and residency hearings for you, and that's what that line is. LRP Publications is not a firm. That's an online database of cases and OCR findings and things like that that I use as a reference. The American Arbitration Association is when we have gone to arbitration or are going to arbitration and we end up settling, we still have to pay a fee to an arbitrator, and that's what that line is. And then there are a few other individuals named in your packet, and those are arbitrators as well.
I guess I see, I'm sorry if I say this wrong, Nuttall, McAvoy, and Joyce?
That's a firm that drafted our 504 handbook for us that we have been working on.
Okay. And the arbitrators at the bottom of page 3, were those are for mediation, weren't they? Michael,
I
Richie?
actually don't have my handout from last week, so I think so, but I don't know exactly which page you're on.
This was off of the spreadsheet with the support info from 127 to 173. I was hoping we could hear a little bit more about this is from Mrs. Vitale's question regarding the space differences between the two high schools in terms of that additional locker room. There was a reference, for example, to a Ward's second boys' locker room, but then no mention of what it was used for. And now there's being a second one added at Ludlow, and I was hoping we could hear a little bit more about that before I ask any of my other ones.
So I can't tell you exactly what the locker rooms
Actually,
are used for.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second, just because I asked that question early. We're talking about operations and maintenance today, so I'm going to ask you to hold that question until we delve into those pages.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off there, Mr. Papa George.
No, it's fine. I don't want to be redundant. And off the same sheet, I just wanted to put out there, because I know I submitted it somewhere as a question. I was trying to get to it, but concern regarding the size of the teams. And specifically, I'd been concerned about the 6th grade size at Tomlinson. It seemed to me that it, again, just throwing out there, that it would have been appropriate to consider 3 teams there, considering the population and reducing that size, because right now they are sizable. And so and then I'd also noticed the same with Roger Ludlow 7th grade, that seems like it could have been 3 teams and not 2 extremely sizable ones. So I was wondering if you could explain how the team is impacted by them being so large. Are they still able to be teams, or aren't other teachers coming in and doing supplemental time so that the kids aren't part of a team anymore? Or if you could explain more about that setup.
Sure. Well, I think they are larger teams. They're within the contractual limits of the teams, but they are larger teams. There is supplemental services offered. So, for example, some of those students on team will get reading from other teachers who are not on team. But they're going to be larger than, as I gave in my response to that question, they're going to be larger than teams where we have enough students to justify 3, and the divisor works in such a way that the team, the class size, and I'm making this up off the top of my head right now, but it might go from 24 in a class to 22 or 21, just based on the fact that Fairfield Woods, for example, could justify 3 teams. So we did not look at the idea of adding teams. I think, quite honestly, or adding staff to the middle school. Quite honestly, it's a budget issue. I mean, if we're in contractually in rights, and I know this kind of jumps to a question that you're going to ask a little bit later here, but the only exception we make to that is the current situation at McKinley, where we go below the accepted elementary level in response to other needs. It would really be clearly a board decision to weigh in on that and to kind of break the rule, as it were, around what our class size limits are. But a team of 4 people would cost us up of 300,000 plus at a single school. So that's really what it came down to.
And I understand the idea of a team of 4, but I assume that those are already having to have, maybe 2 English teachers, for example, serving one team, or 2 science teachers serving one team. So they're not teams of 4. Or are they able to do that, dividing those 117 kids into just 2 teams? Are they served by 8 teachers?
8 teachers in total. Yeah, there'd be 2 teams of 4 for each of those grade levels.
And thus the relatively significantly larger class size.
Yes.
So just off the top of my head, if enrollment numbers changed enough so that mathematically it made more sense to have 3 teams there and to take another level at any of the 3 middle schools and change from 3 to 2, is that an adjustment that would be made?
Absolutely. I think our middle school numbers have to be responsive to this, it's just like our elementary numbers are. If you go from, you've seen this, right? A bubble at an elementary school, that 4 sections that move up through the grades, but everybody else grade goes back to 3. That would absolutely be justified and necessary. It goes ahead to an argument, one of the conversations we started having in the fall around proposed middle school schedule, and the idea that the teaming structure there would reduce the size of the teams only because of that additional class.
Okay, and since you already alluded to it, I'll jump ahead to my other question, which was regarding, since Holland Hill is identified as a Title I school, why that doesn't get any of the same consideration that McKinley gets.
And I'm going off of memory on this because this happened before my tenure in Fairfield. My understanding was that the lowering of the class size ratio at Fairfield, at McKinley, was related to the desire to have people opt into the school. So it would be a selling point for the school that the class sizes would be lower than they would be at the other schools. It was also in relation to the student achievement issues there.
I don't recall that, but I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't have that same
I
recollection.
could well be wrong. I acknowledge that, but this is what I was told 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. My next question was regarding the, thank you for all of that information on the athletics and the activity fees. It was a lot of information to digest, also, a topic we're obviously bringing up in policy. But I was wondering, where was the income number regarding door receipts and where that money goes?
I'll talk to Ms. Munsell.
The schools collect it and it goes into their student activity account, and then they send it to us in central office. It's only been the past few years where they've had accumulated any funds there since they've changed their charging structure. They charge students and they raised their rates. Before then, they were in a losing situation with door receipts.
So it was being paid out as it came in? I mean, no matter what, it's income coming in. So if it wasn't being reported, then where was it being spent before it made it into an account?
Well, it's income coming in, but they have to pay the expenses associated with those games also. So it's only been in the past few years where they've made any money off of that.
So just on a regular Friday night basketball game where they're charging admission at the door, that's going to pay the security?
Correct.
And, okay. Sorry, hold on, let me go. And, all right, this is my question 7 is a longer one. I'm just going to hold that till later. My final question. This is regarding from last Tuesday, attachment number 4, which was regarding the smaller enrollment numbers in the magnet schools. And I was wondering if there was any way that that column of numbers could represent, does it represent, I assume it does, some type of either net cost or net savings based on the fact that those enrollment numbers have gone down outside of the Fairfield Public Schools district?
I think that's one, when we were looking at this question before, we guessed wrong on what you meant by attachment 4. So we have to look into that one, I think, a little bit more. So that can you just repeat again? That was related to the out-of-district magnet enrollment?
That's correct.
Going down?
That's correct.
Okay. There was one other question you asked.
Yeah, that was question 7, which was rather long regarding the unilateral outplacements, which the memo had only referenced PPT placements and not the unilateral ones.
All right, we can come, but right above that on number 6, you asked a question about PD.
Oh, right, I skipped right over that. Yes, that there was a PD cost for the athletics at both schools, and I was wondering what that was in reference to.
We'll have to look into that. I think we have a guess that it might have to do with coach, and, it could be CPR or concussion protocols, that type of thing, but we're going to have to look into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Jacobson.
Just a quick couple follow-ups. I did have a question as well on the unilateral placements, just for my own education. I was wondering if those are handled on an annual basis, or if once they're in and settled, that's for the duration of however many years are left, or is that something that's revisited on an annual basis in terms of still remaining in that placement?
Rob Mancusi, Director of Special Ed. Each settlement agreement has a term to the agreement. So when the agreement is about to expire, or the year in which the settlement agreement is about to expire, we work with the family for next steps. And in response to Mrs. Kennelly's question number 7 that she referenced, there will be something put together for your Friday packet.
Thank you very much. And then just one last question. The non-public enrollment, we got total numbers of students in and out. I was wondering if there was any trend analysis in terms of particular grade spans or levels, like elementary, middle, high, transition years, where you can kind of expect that number in terms of an enrollment, or is it just really random in nature?
We'll have to look into that. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll dive right into the next few sections. We're going to start with revenue, pages 7 through 18, and the accompanying backup.
Let me just jump in quick and orient you to the packets you have at your desk. And again, thank you to the executive directors, program directors, principals, everybody who contributed answers here, as well as Ms. Brown, who put it all together. At your table, you have the large 11 by 17 sheets. In highlighted blue are questions that we responded to at the last meeting. And then anything in white are questions that we either gave you preliminary answers for last Friday afternoon, or questions that came in that we were either not able to answer last Friday afternoon or came in over the weekend and we responded to today. So anything in white is a new question and response. Behind that is there's several attachments that accompany questions that came in over the weekend that I apologize. There's a couple attachments that we didn't get to on Friday to send to you, and those are included as well.
Mrs. Max Kennelly.
So on income, and I'm jumping right on Mrs. Jacobson's question because I'd had the same one and forgot to submit it. And this was regarding, I believe Mr. Arnone misread the question, which I now see why, but it was a question regarding pre-K 5, not pre-K through 5. And that if this is something, I didn't know if the Finance Committee had brought this topic up, but the idea of exploring adding that to the offerings of Fairfield Public Schools is an option. Because I know that the Finance Committee got the charges that private schools charge for that program, and it's, just that possibility of adding that. So that was, I guess it's number 20. I think if that's what it is on page 3.
Frank Arnone, Executive Director of Innovations. Thank you for bringing that piece up. You are right. I was confused. I thought you were talking about the pre-K to 5th grade, our summer school program. That's a very good question. We have not looked at doing a pre-K 5 program during the summer. Many of the staff, the problem goes on that was because we're also doing our IEP students to be able to give them summer program at the same time. So I will talk with Mrs. Bruno and Mr. Mancusi to see if that is something we can look further into. I'll get back to you.
But just to follow up, I think this is far beyond. This is actually a preschool for 5-year-olds running through the school year. So for those parents who decide, and of course the state is once again looking at changing the kindergarten enrollment date back to September. And so just that idea of, for those parents who do pre-K3, pre-K4, actually a third additional year of preschool during the school year.
Yeah.
There has been some discussion, and at the ECC, over the past 2 school years, there has been 42 students who are kindergarten eligible that did not move on to kindergarten. That doesn't mean all 42 students remained at the ECC, but several students, in consultation with their PPT and their parents, do stay for an additional, if that's what the PPT team determines appropriate.
Okay, I'm going to try take one more shot at this.
And I think, to clarify, I think that Mrs. Maxicanelli is really just talking about not necessarily children that are receiving special education services, but creating a new program offered by the Fairfield Public Schools for all children who are, based on their age, are eligible to attend kindergarten or should be attending kindergarten per statute, but their families choose not to, and providing that programming.
So this is
for
purely a
5-year-olds.
monetizing our assets kind of thing. While we have the space, and obviously a PPT directed, that's an IEP directed, that's a completely separate venture. But I'm talking about just as parents are looking for this program, and I don't know if Mrs. Leeper can add to that, because I know Finance Committee did gather data on this.
Mrs. Leeper?
We did talk about it in Finance Committee, and the conversation did not go very far because I think it's a whole nother initiative. It's essentially adding another grade that we don't have. So the space is one issue, but then the staff that would teach it, the curriculum they would teach, and then how would we determine the teachers, the children that would be eligible? Would we have a lottery system? And it seemed, I think at the time, like it wouldn't be a revenue generator. It would probably be a cost to the district. So I think because of sort of a lack of enthusiasm, we didn't pursue it further. That doesn't mean we can't take another look at it. That was, I believe, last year, and now there's a different administrative team, and maybe there will be different thoughts about it. So if you guys are requesting finance to check it out again, we can do that.
Mr. Cummings, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
I do. I think we'd have to also look at the legality of that. I think that there's issues around school-age attendance and how long a student can be in preschool who's a non-identified student. So, for example, when we've had students who were in the regular ed pre-K 3-4 program, and parents would get in touch with, and they're now eligible to go to K, and parents would get in touch with us and say, we'd like to do another year. We had to say no to them because at that point, they'd been 2 years in our preschool, which was the maximum, and then they really had to go to kindergarten. And so what parents would often do is then take the child out, put them in a private, and then they'd bring them back for kindergarten. So I think we'd have to explore this around state statute and attendance legislation. I think we'd have to look into it.
So we can definitely, well, speaking for the chair of the finance, I will refer this back to the Finance Committee if that is the will of the board for further discussion. I think that in terms of this budget, it's not something we're going to be putting in this budget, so I would like not to devote any more time to it. But thank you for bringing it up again. Any additional questions? Yeah, we're still on revenue. Mr. Asa.
First off, thanks to everyone who answered all the questions. Appreciate that. Ms. Munzel, you had mentioned on my question about Bridgeport and their payments on open choice. This number kind of stood out to me. without divulging any personal information or anything like that, but could you just touch on maybe, or Mr. Mancusi, a couple things that we would be billing for? Like what do we bill $183,000 for? Sorry, in the revenue packet. Question page number 7. Oh, flip, not in the blue, it's for this. Oh, sorry, my finger was over it.
So, Mr. Asa, we bill for any and all special education services, related services, OT, PT, speech, counseling, special education teacher support, for all open choice kids who are special education.
So, but open choice is not just children with identified needs, correct?
Correct.
So for those open choice students that come to us with an IEP, if they were receiving services, we bill Bridgeport. So, and it could be for OT.
And when these students come to us, I know they go through an interview process, I believe, that's set up, correct? Are we aware of these ahead of time?
I believe they're chosen by lottery, and when we find out who the students are, if they already have an existing IEP, that IEP then is shared with us, and then we plan accordingly, and we would bill for the services that that student receives.
Okay, so in essence, we're covering all costs related to it, so we're not taking away from any services being offered to a Fairfield resident.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I was just a little confused. I appreciate the update.
I just want to add to that, that also if a student came to us and while with us was identified, the same process would go into place.
Any other questions on revenue? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward to staff salaries, pages 43 through 72. Ms. Leeper.
Is it too late to ask a revenue question?
No, it's not.
I was flipping through and trying to find mine. So I had asked when the last time the open choice grant was adjusted, and it has never been adjusted, which was sort of my hunch, but I'm glad it was confirmed. Is there an opportunity where we could pursue that with our legislators, perhaps, to better incentivize towns to accept open choice students? Is there action we could take to help at least even keep up with inflation?
Yeah, I think we can beg. There is an additional codicil, I suppose, in the legislation that talks about if a school were to increase its population of open choice students, I think it's by 10, they get a bonus. It's difficult to do here. I think I was able to do it 1 year, maybe my second year here. The school actually doesn't get the bonus. The district gets the bonus. The check goes to the school, and you just have to watch them. But but that's really difficult to do in Fairfield, where we don't have that many slots as it is. That's really the only incentive that's built into the program. And I think the program now has got to be getting to 25, 30 years old. And it's really remained $3,000 since that beginning of time.
Well, thank you. Through the chair to Mrs. Jacobson, perhaps we could make a little noise about this. I mean, Connecticut has the largest achievement gap in the nation. This is one very modest initiative the state started a long time ago in response to, Chef Ross O'Neill, so that our other urban areas, there was some sharing of this issue with our more fortunate suburbs. And if they really wanted to incentivize suburban districts to take a share of urban kids, seems like an easy way to do it.
I can bring it up on Saturday.
I'd love that.
Ms. Lieber?
And I just want to also confirm that, through the chair to Mr. Mancusi, that we get full reimbursement for our evaluations for non-public school students? Is that true?
Excuse me. Our non-public students or our non-public staff who performs evaluations are funded through the IDEA grant. We are required to set aside a proportionate share of our overall grant for non-publics. And we also have the health and welfare grant through the town of Fairfield that helps compensate and support our Child Find efforts in all our evaluations.
That's great. And just one more clarifying question. That includes all students who never were enrolled with the public school. So this isn't just outplay students. This is all Fairfield children who.
It's all Fairfield
Awesome.
children and non-Fairfield residents who are parentally placed in private schools within the Fairfield boundaries.
Thank you.
Any other questions on revenue? That's okay. All right, back to staff salaries. Ms. Lieber?
I think this is probably to Mrs. Deasy about our substitute teachers line. I think I ask this at every budget cycle because it seems like we're often significantly budgeted below what the actuals are. And I was wondering and I get that if you have a long-term sub, that's a huge expense that you can't anticipate. But I'm curious what the average cost is per school for subs for PPTs, because we use subs to cover for teachers during PPTs. Is that correct?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. I'd be curious about that. I'd be curious if that was something that we could address contractually to move PPTs to non-instructional time, and what the cost would be for paying teachers extra time versus paying for subs. Because also this could have an instructional impact when teachers are missing instructional time. So there's a cost either way. It's just something